So, big question of the day, Mike. Who won the draft? I haven't looked.
Oh, good question. Last time I looked, I was ahead of you, but barely.
Show results. Oh, you beat me by 1 vote.
Did I?
That's not even fair. 1 vote.
I don't believe I voted, by the way.
You didn't?
No. I abstained.
Oh, so you're going to beat me by 2 votes?
Well, I didn't know what the official rules were.
You have to vote for yourself. Well, I suppose you could vote for me. That would make it a tie. I don't have it so where you can see who voted.
Maybe if minus the end of absence, maybe. I'll just take my crown as the 2018 Bookworm Literary Champion and leave the margin of victory to your imagination. Well, thanks everybody for voting. That was a fun episode. We got some pretty good feedback on that. And I was really happy with the way it turned out. I was nervous about doing it because it was a different format than what we normally do. And I was concerned by condensing the books down into such a short synopsis, we were going to lose some of the magic of Bookworm. But based on what people have told me anyways, it sounds like that wasn't the case, that they still got a lot out of it, which is awesome.
Yeah, I have a few friends that they are loyal Bookworm listeners and were pretty excited about it just because they felt like they could get a quick overview of a whole bunch of books all at once. So hopefully, I mean, that was our goal. So hopefully it worked out that way. That's the intent anyway. How are we doing on the Bookworm shirts?
They are officially going to print. I think as of yesterday, there were 20 of them sold. The goal was 12, which is pretty good. I was looking at Austin Kleon, the author of Steal Like an Artist. If you look at his profile, it's like New York Times bestselling author of 3 different books. He had a campaign that was going, and it ended as we're recording this a couple days ago. So it overlapped with ours a little bit, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you would see, because of the tag books, that his was one of the suggested other shirts that you could support.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting like 36 total shirts that he sold. And it's not the only time he's released this shirt, so when you go to it now, you'll see the total number that he's ever sold. But when I saw that, I was like, we got to beat Austin Kleon. We got to beat 36. And I think we'll get there. I mean, we've got almost 2 weeks left as we're recording this.
Right.
On the campaign. We gave out a free shirt to a club member. And when we hit 25, we'll get another free code. So help us reach that milestone. Also at 25, we get paid a percentage of the proceeds. So it's not going to be a lot, I know, but that's really not the point. I just wanted a Bookworm shirt, which is kind of why I did it. But the link will be in the show notes. It's bookworm.fm/shirt, right? That's the redirect?
Yes, so bookworm.fm/shirt. Yep.
Cool, yep. So you can go there and you can get your shirts prior to July 26th, I believe. And you'll be supporting Bookworm. You'll be building your nerd cred, and you'll be the coolest cat in your local library.
Paul was the winner of the raffle.
Congratulations, Paul.
What else we got here? Okay. So we didn't talk about this last time. I don't remember if this had actually happened yet or not as of the recording date. So we didn't talk about it. But for Bookworm listeners, we now have a celebrity on this show, depending on how you look at it. But Mike is now on, he's a part of the Relay FM family. He is now the co-host of Free Agents. I was pretty excited whenever I found out you were going to be doing this. It seems like it'd be a great fit for you, Mike. So Mike is now on Relay. That's still amazing to me.
I am a quote-unquote professional podcaster, I guess. Woohoo! So kind of a long story, but I got hooked up with David Sparks, and I obviously knew who David was. He kind of discovered me through Bookworm, which is kind of cool. I was on Mac Power Users a couple months ago, and Jason Snell, the former co-host of Free Agents, had basically said everything he wanted to say on the topic. David and I were going back and forth about working on some project in some form in the future. And then he said that, there's an opening on Free Agents. I think you might be a good fit. You interested? And I said, yes, but I'm not technically a quote unquote free agent. I mean, I work for a company. I got some different side stuff that I do, but I'm not your traditional freelancer type person who's completely in control of everything that they do. I mean, there's people that I report to and stuff like that, but It's actually been really interesting because I love the show. I've been listening to it forever. I'm excited to contribute to it. And I was talking to you before we hopped on the call here. There's a discourse forum, which is part of the Mac Power Users forum that you put together. And there's a whole section in there devoted to the Free Agents podcast. And somebody who listened to the show put together a poll, and the options were, I'm a free agent, I want to be a free agent, or I'm completely happy working for the man. And they put it up yesterday, I think, as we're recording this. And when I last checked it, like 50% of the responses were, I'm completely happy working for the man. And a lot of people were chiming in with stuff like, the things that you talk about on free agents, I can apply to my situation, even though I'm not looking to, quote unquote, become a free agent necessarily, which I think is really cool. I think that's really the whole idea behind the show, is designing your life the way that you want it so that you have control over the things that you want to control. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're working for a boss that you don't like, maybe that manifests as, I need to make that leap. I need to become a quote unquote free agent just so I can bet on myself. And that was the title of the first episode I did. But also, I mean, you could be in a situation where things are going pretty good and there's just a few things that you want to tweak. And I think that there's definitely a lot in that show that could apply to that person as well. So it's been cool to see the feedback that I've gotten. People seem to be happy with me as the new co-host. I try to ignore the people who are unhappy that I'm not Jason Snell or Casey Liss, who everybody, I guess, thought was going to be the logical choice for the co-host. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's a thrill to be on Relay. It's a thrill to work with David, who's long been, I've called him one of my internet heroes. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been a long time listener of Free Agents. I remember when it first came out, and David was sharing it on all of his respective, media outlets, and tuned in right away and have been listening. I don't think I've caught every episode, but I've caught a lot of them. And that has a lot to do with, it coming out at about the time that I was becoming a free agent, or, it was neck deep in it at that point. And it's been a pretty inspiring show. It's taught me a lot, and I'm excited to see you join that. I know you don't really think of yourself as a free agent, but you definitely set your own.
I march to the beat of my own drum, that's for sure.
Yeah, like you can set your own schedule, you can set your own blah, 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 but there is a company that you work for, but at the same time, like you can, if you think it through, treat that as, the quote unquote free agent concept.
Yep.
And I think you do a pretty good job of that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I'm learning, and what I'm kind of figuring out. We've only recorded a couple of episodes, but I do feel that the more I get entrenched in this, the more comfortable I'll become. And really, like from the very beginning, I felt like I had something to contribute, or I wouldn't have said yes. And I think that there's a lot of people who can benefit from my experience. You can learn from my mistakes. That's really the goal behind pretty much everything that I do. I've mentioned before on this podcast that like my life theme, help people answer the question, why am I here? By inspiring, encouraging, and teaching them how to discover their destiny, connect to their calling, and live the life they were created for. Now, your definition is going to be a little bit different than mine, but the process is still going to be the same. And I guess what I'm discovering, and Free Agents is helping me to realize, is that nothing is so cut and dry as like you fit into one of these boxes. I've learned anything over the last several years, it's that I don't fit in any boxes. And so free agency is no different. I mean, technically, I'm not quote unquote a free agent, but I recognize that in a lot of ways I am a free agent. And there's a lot of things that I've experienced and that I've learned from that a lot of people can benefit from, even if their situation isn't exactly the same as mine.
Well, I'm super happy for you, and I'm definitely listening. For sure, you can count on that. And I may scream once in a while and say, Mike, no, we got to talk about that. I may yell at you through the earbuds once in a while just because I can't help myself. I do that with almost every podcast. It seems like I'm yelling at somebody in my head every time I listen to one, even when I would listen to my own. So count on that for sure.
One interesting thing I noticed, by the way, an effect that Bookworm has had in episode 51 of Free Agents, which as we record this was just published. I put together the links for that episode. I referenced so many books. It was ridiculous. I went back and I looked through, like, how did they do the links for the previous episodes? There really aren't that many links.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the episode that we're talking about content, I've got like 10 different books that I've referenced.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bookworm, for giving me a bigger perspective.
Yeah. And I'll have another point about that when we get into today's book. But before I do that, well, first off, congratulations. Glad to see that you're on Relay, and I hope Free Agents continues to go well. So best of luck to you there.
Thank you.
So if you're listening to this and you don't tune into Free Agents, we talk about a lot of the concepts through the books, obviously, like the connection that Mike just made there. So I would recommend tuning in. It's a shorter. Each show is a little bit shorter than, what is it, half of how long Bookworm is? Aren't they like 45 minutes or so?
45, 50 minutes. Yeah. They're definitely shorter than your average Bookworm episode.
So tune in for sure. But outside of podcasting, as we're recording this next weekend, Mike and I are going to be in Illinois, and we will be at MacStock with stickers, right? Or do you have bookmarks? You better have bookmarks. I know how many bookmarks you ordered, so we have to have bookmarks.
I've got bookmarks. I've got stickers too. So I think I got 200 stickers. So I'll give you 100. I'll have 100, and we'll give some out. I'm not sure how many people at MacStock are going to be Bookworm listeners, but if you are, definitely come up and say hi to Joe and myself. I'll be presenting. I'm presenting on the Apple User's Guide to Personal Productivity. I'm going to be talking about 5 different pieces of a personal productivity system and why I think Apple technology really is better designed than anything else out there for helping you be more productive. As I've been working on this presentation, I realized that like when I submitted the idea, it sounded great. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And now that it's getting closer and I'm working on the slide deck and what I'm going to say and all that, I recognize that like there is so much that I could cover here and it's going to be hard to bring it down to 20 minutes. Now, fortunately, I have a deep dive also. So I have a feeling the 20-minute presentation is going to be kind of on like the advantages that Apple hardware and software give you and some specific workflows, use cases on like how you can do this to be more effective, why this will make you more productive. And then the deep dive is just going to be like rapid fire, one right after the other, all of these different tools, services, workflows that I've used on Apple devices to be more productive. Because a lot of these things, like you can use them in a lot of different situations. And I think my thought at the moment anyways, is that the best way to help people see the value of these things is to show examples of me using it, not saying like, this is the way you have to do it sort of a thing, but just a whole bunch of examples of things like Pop Clip, for example, or Moom and stuff like that. The reflection workflow that I do for journaling, things like that, just to give people some ideas.
So I'm pretty excited about MacStock, partially because you and I get to see each other again. It's like the one time of the year that we can count on seeing each other.
It's true.
So I'm excited about that. There's a few friends making the trip down with me as well. We'll be carpooling together. And then there's a few, like, to use Mike's term, internet heroes and folks that we love who will be there that we get to connect with. So it's always a good time. So if you haven't picked up tickets or haven't decided to go, like, hit us up, come join us there. But didn't they do, I feel like I just saw something new come through in my email about this. They got something else.
So 2 things. If you're listening to this, you still probably have a couple of days to get your butt down to Woodstock, Illinois for MacStock. And if you do, you can use the code Productivity Show, which is the one that they assigned me as a speaker, and you can save $70 off of the $250 weekend pass. So it's a pretty big savings on the conference itself. But if you can't get down there, there's also, I saw a digital pass that they just announced. So I believe that you're going to be able to get all of the talks from the conference without physically being there if you can't make it. But if you can make it, it's awesome. It's a smaller conference. It's a lot of fun. A lot of really, really smart people are there. People much smarter than me. Like Brett Terpstra is going to be presenting, Adam Christensen, Gene McDonald, Max Sparky's going to be there, David Sparks, Don McAllister is going to be there from Screencasts Online, Allison Sheridan, lots of people in the Mac community. And when I first went down there, I was not, quote unquote, a part of the Mac community yet. I had never gone to Mac World. I really had done nothing in the online space. I just was 3 hours from my house. And it was announced the year that they canceled Macworld in California, and I was getting ready to go to that. So I'm like, well, I'll drive down and see what it's like. But from the moment I got there, I mean, the Apple community is amazing. It doesn't matter if you don't know anybody. You will know many people by the time that you leave. Everybody is opening and welcoming, and it's really cool. I remember going down there and sitting with a group of guys that I've never met. One of them is Dave Ginsburg from the suburban Chicago area Apple users group. first time I went down there, and I didn't know any of these guys. I sat down and had lunch with them, and we left as friends. So don't let the fact that you don't know anybody keep you from coming to MacStock.
It'll be a good time. So for sure, if you are listening to this and you're going to be there, come find us. We have goodies, and we can hang out and talk. Because like Mike said, you get to meet lots of new friends, meet new people. In some cases, meet people you followed online for a long time. So, it's a fun time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I suppose I should give the URL for this. It's MacStock Conference and Expo. So we'll make sure that gets in the show notes.
It's long to type. Every time I try to hunt for it, thankfully I typed that in once, so I can just type in like Mac S and it autofills for me now. So super handy. Anyway, yes, link in the show notes to make that easier. So all of that out of the way, Mike, you ready to jump into today's book?
Let's do it.
It's your pick.
Yeah, today's book is Great at Work by Morten Hansen. And I picked this one specifically because it was a listener recommendation. So I know we'll talk about this at the end, but go to club.bookworm.fm and vote for the books that you want us to cover. We really do look at those. Sometimes, I'll pick something that isn't voted for just because I really want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
But our community is pretty awesome, and I was looking at it today. I've got another one picked here, which is based off of listener votes. But this was a listener recommendation. It was the most requested book when I picked it for episode 50. And I can say that I'm glad that I did. This is a really cool book. If you like research-based information, he's got tons of studies. He's got specific examples and percentages behind every claim that he makes. It's really interesting. Like even in the introduction, he talks about how 66% of individual performance is determined by 7 individual work smart practices, which he then talks about in the rest of the book. But like right there, he's not saying like these are the things that are going to determine your personal and professional success, which is what most people would say, something along those lines. Like, do these things and you'll be successful. I just know it, trust me. He says, no, 66% exactly is determined by these practices. So get good at these things.
And it's, this is one thing that I really appreciated in his book, because so many times you read, especially with, and I'll just make a confession here. I was super nervous about reading this. The reason being that whenever I read the bio for Morten Hansen, that he's a management professor at University of California, Berkeley. He's a faculty member of Apple University, Apple. He's going through these credentials of like PhDs, and he's a scholar, and he's all this stuff. Like, okay, most of the time, stereotypically when we go through these books, they're ones that I don't always enjoy, just because it seems like they want to just talk about the research over and over and over again, and it gets kind of boring and mundane to me. However, Mr. Hansen does a wonderful job of taking you through, like, here's the research we did, but that's like 3 or 4 pages that he takes you through, like, what they did in order to get the data for the rest of the book. And the rest of the book is talking about each principle, but he doesn't say, this will make you more successful. He says, this will increase your success by 15%.
Yep, very exact.
If you're the 97th percentile on part 1, then you are 60% more successful. Okay, so you have some pretty detailed numbers here, and he's not just saying, this is the way this all works. Like, he has measurements for how much more successful you are based on the data that people collected on.
He's got the pedigree to make these claims too. I mean,
true.
He initially, his claim to fame was that he co-authored Good to Great, right? That's the one with Jim Collins.
It's on my bookshelf over here. I had to look at it. Yes.
Yeah. So Good to Great is and all of the other books in that series, like Built to Last and Great by Choice, I think, is another one. Like, those kind of focus on what makes organizations or companies successful. And Great at Work, he says this in the first section, this is really about what you can do as an individual. So it doesn't matter if you run your own company. Like, these are things that you can apply to your personal life. And he has a lot of different stories of people who were not quote unquote decision makers in their organizations and how they applied this, which are really cool.
So he has these 7 points, and I guess we could just go through each one. It's in 2 different parts. First part being taking care of yourself, essentially.
Yep.
Working with yourself, how to handle working yourself. And then part 2, just what you would expect, working with other people, and I will admit that I appreciated that there were 4 of the 7 on working on yourself and 2 or 3 on working with others. So for whatever reason, I was happy that was the breakdown.
Yeah. So part 1, mastering your own work. That's where 4 of them, like you mentioned, are located. Part 2, mastering work with others. 3 of them there. Then there's a part 3, which I may or may not have a rant on, mastering your work life. And there's one really section underneath that, and then an epilogue. So by the time you get to that point, he's basically said everything that he's going to say.
Right.
Although work life, we'll put a pin in that for now. So part 1, mastering your own work. And the first habit here is do less than obsess. I love this idea. I mean, it sounds very simple, but he breaks it down that there are 4 different types or groups of people. There's the accept more and then coast group, which is the worst. And then level up from that, I guess, if you were to create a pyramid or a hierarchy, do less, no stress. Okay. And I think that this is interesting, this book, because this is the one, if you're not careful about how you read a lot of the books that are in the productivity space right now, Essentialism, The Power of Less, things like that, the Joshua Becker one that we covered for Bookworm, like you can think that less is ideal and it makes sense. If you have less to do, then you're not going to stress about things. And that's good, but it's not the highest level that Morten Hansen describes here. And I tend to agree with him, I think. All right, so that's level 2. Level 3, do more, then stress. This is where a lot of people get stuck. And then from here, obviously, you've got 2 directions you can go. You can do less with no stress. You can go down a level, or you can figure out how to do better. And that's really what the last level is do less than obsess. So it's not the fact that you're doing less in terms of work. It's that you're focusing on less priorities. And then you are obsessing about these things, doing them to the very best of your ability and creating excellent products, excellent work. Maybe that word creating, like that's the wrong word to use there, because I think when you hear creating, you can think of writers or artists or things like that. You don't have to be a podcaster. You don't have to be a blogger. You don't have to be a content creator in order to understand this idea. So I just want to make that point clear, but that's really the gold standard, and that's what we should be shooting for, according to Morten Hansen. And I think I agree. What about you?
I would agree, and I would say that this particular section, I read it, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. I read this whole section, and I set it down, stared out the window, because this was, I think I finished reading it maybe like 6:15 in the morning, so no one was up yet. And I'm looking out the window, watching the sun coming up, and had a bit of a crisis moment, Mike, and realized that, one of the things I talk about frequently is all the different arenas that I work in and the things that I do between podcasting and running communities and trying to do some writing online, managing clients, doing development work, doing IT work. I have a lot. And this section kind of led me to the point where I was trying to determine, can I pick 3 that to work on? Because I could easily see how I could plan out my weeks and days such that I could handle 3 decent endeavors. But then I start looking at things like, my pro course business, the web development side of things, like it kind of falls into 2 camps by itself. It's like, okay, maybe getting down to 3 doesn't work, because if I try to get down to 3, then I have to do things like cut bookworm, and I don't want to do that. So, okay, this isn't going to work out so well. So what I've been doing is, instead of, and I don't really have a good action item on this, because I didn't really know what to do with it other than just keep it as a mindset. And it's a thing where I've been looking at, what is it that we do? Like, how do I go about building a bookworm episode to get it released? Like, how does that process work? And we have some changes that we're going to probably make to make that process simpler and easier, at least on my end. And there's also things with what I do in my pro course business from a client management stance that I can do to help with the process of getting projects up and moving quicker and closing them out quicker too. So between those two, like, I think what I need to be focusing more on is doing less within those sectors, because I feel like I'm doing a lot of work that I shouldn't be. And if I narrow down the specifics for each of those and then obsess over those particular pieces, I think that's where I would have the biggest bang for my buck on this. But I will say, yes, so section 1, right out of the gate, I was left on our back deck staring at the sunrise in a bit of a moment. So, like, all right.
I had a similar situation because I read this. I was in the process of reading this when I did I call it my personal retreats, my once a quarter thinking day. And I always ask myself 3 questions. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I keep doing? One of the things that I've implemented the last couple personal retreats is to pick at least one thing that I'm going to stop doing. And so as I'm going through this, I kind of had the same initial reaction you did, is like, well, I've got too much going on. I need to just cut everything. But I don't think that that's the right approach either. I think that 3 is an arbitrary number. I don't know if you came up with that or if he came up with that.
I don't remember.
But I think it's dangerous. Okay. I think more important is to identify the things that are in alignment with, like I've mentioned, my life theme, and I said it even at the beginning of this episode. So what are the things that are in complete alignment with your life theme? And then look at the way things are right now and figure out what changes you need to make. That's one of my action items, which is something that I'm doing, but it's something that I want to continue to think about doing as it pertains to everything that I'm involved in, is the next section. He talks about redesigning your work. So what are the things that I can do to redesign my work and really my life to the specifications that I want? How can I create the life that I want to live, that I'm excited about living every single day when I wake up in the morning? And regardless of your situation, we talked about the free agency thing. Like, you can apply that whether you are a quote unquote free agent, whether you are completely happy working for the man, whether you are leading a team of discourse experts, like whatever it is. But I think the things that you select, the number doesn't really matter, but they have to be, well, obviously you need to make sure that you have enough time, you have enough energy, willpower, whatever, motivation to do the things that you're committing yourself to. And then also I would say, or add to that, that they should be in line with your unique ability. So what is the thing that really makes you you, that really brings you energy, that brings you life? If you're doing a bunch of things that aren't in line with your unique ability, those are the things that you should stop doing. That's where, is it Occam or Occam's razor comes in?
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor. Yeah, the simplest solution is the best solution. And taking that and applying it to the different things that you're committed to. I mean, if you view it that way, and when you look at things, usually you'll find 1 or 2 things that you're like, yeah, that's really not the right thing anymore. That's not a great fit. That's something that should go on the quote unquote chopping block. You know, maybe you don't decommit from it right away, but it's not something that, at least right now, you can tell like this has kind of run its course. But you have to achieve some distance in order to view those things the right way. And it doesn't matter if you take a whole day for a personal retreat like I did, or you have that moment of clarity at 6:15 in the morning when you finish this book. Like, you do need to have that aha moment though. And I think if you're looking for it, it's not that rare.
Yeah, I think there's some valid points in there. I think so much of what we do is building these new adventures, or at least I do. Like, I build a lot of this new stuff, but I'm not always the best at building it efficiently at first, which, you know, I would almost argue that when you first get something launched, you just get it out the door and then not worry about efficiency right away. And then over time, you can start to refine it and make it better. Like, that to me seems like the point here that I'm trying to take on. But regardless, I think, you know, and this is something we talk about on Bookworm a lot. Like, so many of these books, my wife tends to call them just a repeat with a different author.
Yep.
Like, it's a lot of the same, just in a different voice. And I think that's okay to a point, because this concept of do less than obsess, we have talked about this before. Like, the whole minimalism, we read a whole book on that. And even with like essentialism, it's almost an entire book on this one point. We've talked about this before, Mike, and yet here we are reading another book talking about this concept. He throws some numbers at it, has some data behind it. Maybe that's different, but at the same time, like, okay, well, this struck me different for whatever reason. I'm in a different season at this point. Hearing it from somebody else with a different take on it, I don't know. It does have that ability. So as much as some folks like to rail on these things being, rinse and repeat, there's something to be said for the time between them and building across them.
I think when it comes to things like reading a book, bookworm specifically, because we read so many books, we tend to think that if we've heard something once, we should instantly absorb it and get it. But that's not the case. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just dense.
Totally. That's totally it right there.
But I mean, like, I have to hear this stuff over and over and over again. And my kids do too, by the way. So maybe it's not just me. But I think that's kind of human nature, that you have to hear these things over and over and over again. In a different book that I was reading, somebody had said it this way, that like when you are communicating your vision to your team, you have to say it over and over and over again until the point where the people who hear you say it over and over and over again, they're getting sick of hearing you say it. Like they're actively complaining about it, because it's only when they are actively complaining about it that they've finally started to get it. And I think that definitely applies in my own life as well. So yeah, I read a book and it talks about minimalism. It talks about essentialism. It talks about quit doing so much stuff and just focus on the things that you really want to do well. I think that's the principle here. Choose a few priorities and dedicate your efforts towards excelling at them. But if you look at what you're committed to, what you're currently doing, that's where you can tell whether you are really hearing it, whether you are listening to understand, or it's just going in one ear and out the other. Like, what change does it affect in your life? And even if you've totally mastered this is one of the 7 points. So this is a great reminder.
Yeah, it was well worth it. I think you could probably tell this particular section struck us both.
Yep.
So it was one of my favorite parts of the book. But alas, we need to move on here. Part 2, redesigning your work.
Yeah.
And there was some interesting stories on this one. I think this was a section where I kind of had a hard time grasping how I would apply this one. But at the same time, I totally get that the concept is one that I should keep in mind. So that philosophy being one that if you're not having success in the way that you're doing things right now, maybe consider changing that and altering it. And what was the story? It was about the principal, right?
Yep.
The story goes that his particular school was slowly losing ranking, which meant that, the education side of things, that means they start to lose funding. And he had this idea to flip the whole school system, to have teachers record video of their lectures, have the students watch those videos at home, and then spend the entire time at school doing the homework, as opposed to, having the teachers give the lectures in school and then doing the homework at home. And lots of reasons as to why the students weren't getting the homework done, but it was causing a lot of issues. Well, long story short, it worked. And they flipped the entire school over to the new method and had a lot of success in it. And that is the concept of redesigning the work. And that's exactly what this principal did in this case.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he was forced to look at the process they were using to get their results, because he was about to lose his job because of the results that they were getting. The metrics that they were being measured against, which were the failure rates and the graduation rates. And so he recognized that the way they were working wasn't working. So he proposed this new format based on something that he noticed as a baseball coach, where he would create these videos for his team, and then it would help them when they came to practice because they could watch these videos. And by the way, we've talked a little bit, I've gone on rants before about video modeling and mental rehearsal visualization. That's a whole nother topic, but that's really what made that part successful. So he comes back and he flips the instruction, like you said, and the failure rates plummeted from 35% to 10%. Graduation rates rose from 80% to 94%, just because he had a different way of doing things. Now, what's interesting here is that you don't have to wait until your back is against the wall to embrace this principle of redesigning your work. We can all apply this in different ways in different situations. I really like this section. The one part that really stood out to me was this concept of squeezing the orange, trying to squeeze out more productivity after working many hours. This is how most people think of productivity, is how much did I produce? How much work did I actually do? But he's got a different definition here, which I like better. So he's talking about how typically people evaluate work from inside out, where you measure your work by whether you have completed your tasks. But really what we should be doing is evaluating our work from the outside in approach, which is based on how much others benefit from it. So it's the value of work productivity versus traditional productivity, where traditional productivity could be defined as like output of work divided by hours of input. And I've even got something along those lines in my MacStock presentation. But when it comes to your specific vocation or your job, the value of work is different because it equals the benefit to others times the quality times the efficiency. This is the thing that really will move the needle for your personal or your professional life, is figuring out the things that are the important things. This goes back to like the bookworm draft, my number one book, The One Thing. We're going to have to do that at some point because that's what this is all about.
All right. Fair enough. No, I think this is it's a valuable section. You've got a lot of good points here, but the part of this that I feel, and one of the things that I know that he does really well in the book is he does show, like, here's the way that we usually think about these things, and then here is how you should think about them per research and data. And I guess maybe we should have started this whole thing with the story that he tells at the very beginning, because he wasn't always a researcher. He wasn't always a professor. And he joined, what was it, Boston Consulting Group, BCS, or I forget what the name of the group was. It was a consulting firm, and he was going about it the way you would think a lot of new people fresh out of college would. He was going to work super long hours to be one of the best in his workspace so that he could, climb the ladder quickly. I forget how long he was there, but there was one point when he ran across a report by one of his colleagues that was way better than his, and he went to find her to go talk to her about, how did you come about doing this? And, basically, please give me tips. Like, that was the way I took it. Mm-hmm. But she wasn't there. She was at home. And this was, I forget what time at night it was, but he figured out that she was working like normal business hours, and yet she was excelling beyond him. And that was one of the instigators to him going down the path of trying to determine what these 7 principles are and coming to them at all. So it was part of what sparked his whole research. And I feel like this redesigning your work piece, like that's an aspect that I think you have to think abstractly about, and you really have to think outside the box, like the typical get away, find some free space, go for a walk in the woods sort of thing. He doesn't really talk about how to come up with the ideas real well, but I don't think that's the point. Like, it's the concept that this is a thing that you should be doing, and if you figure out how to do it, you can really change the way that you do things.
Yeah, I mean, go take your personal retreat.
I got to do that.
That's my version of this. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a whole day. It could be a couple of hours. It could be anywhere where you've got some time to think about these things, asking the right questions. But those questions can completely change your perspective. In this case, his question was, how are you able to do this when you're not playing the game according to the rules that everybody else is? And that's the thing I think that can apply to everybody's situation. Like, there is so much stuff that we settle for because it is the status quo. This is the way that things are. This is the way that you do things. If you want to be successful, you've got to do it this way. We never stop to question why that's the case. And if you do stop to question why that's the case, you can identify those things that will allow you to get the results without killing yourself. And a lot of times we don't look for those things because we're so caught up in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment, emergency scan modality, David Allen would call it, putting out the fires, that we never even think about what's causing the fires in the first place. He's got a quote in this section where he says, it's easier to sell aspirin than vitamins, but vitamins are the thing that are really going to make the difference. So you do have to get yourself outside the situation and the urgency of the moment so that you can think about these things and see things the right way. And then also, again, this is a book on your personal productivity, I guess, as opposed to what makes you successful as a business. So page 62, there's a quote that I really liked. He says, don't just see yourself as an employee, see yourself as an innovator of work. Hunt and cure pain points, ask stupid questions, and zoom in on how you can redesign and create value for others. I think there's a whole lot of value in that one phrase. If you were to apply just the stuff that he listed in that little section, this book is going to have a profound impact on your life and your career.
Isn't it interesting how many times we say that? Like, this section is the part you need out of this book. Yeah.
True. I mean, but there's a lot of those sections in this particular book. There's also some sections where he condenses it down like that, and I don't agree with it, but we'll get there.
Fair point. All right, section 3, don't just learn, loop. And
this is peak junior.
Yeah, I know. I was really thinking that. And this is a section where he brought up the book Peak, which was funny to me since we just went over that. But he also brought up Carol Dweck's mindset, which, again, I thought was interesting. But I know there were, and those were just the 2 that I wrote down. There was a handful of these books that were brought up, and this is what I was referring to earlier on in the show, about how so many of these books become intertwined, or they become the go-to resource about a specific area. And instead of him like writing an entire book about this one piece, he tends to reference these others that, we have gone over. You go through this enough and you start to pick up on all the big names that everybody refers to. So it's funny to me that, these are books that we just went through, but they've inspired a section or helped explain a piece of his broader research here. So I don't know. I really enjoyed that. It made it kind of interesting. It's funny to see how so many of these reference materials of ours end up incorporating themselves into others. So they're very intertwined. It was kind of fun for me.
This one in particular, I didn't really like this section just because, like you said, it is a rehash of Peak, which we had just read. So that's not Morten Hansen's fault, but we literally just went through this on a much deeper scale. And then even the story that he used at the beginning of this chapter, because he has a story at the beginning of every chapter in the book, was Dan McLaughlin, the PGA guy from Peak. So it was the exact same story, the exact same principles. And then in the end, he tried to apply his own looping tactics section on this, which is okay, but it's not the strongest part of the book in my opinion. So just to recap, without redoing Peak, there's this learning loop, which you can use to really get better at things, and Peak would call it deliberate practice. The learning loop, according to Morten Hansen, is do, measure, get feedback, modify, and then redo. And then he's got these looping tactics that you can use. There's 5 different steps. Number 1, carve out the 15. So carve out 15 minutes and pick only one specific skill that you want to improve. Number 2, chunk it, which means that you're supposed to focus on the micro behaviors. Take less than 15 minutes to perform and review. They have a clear impact on your skill development, but they're these little things that you want to focus on, not the big thing. Measure the soft, which, if I remember right, this is talking about soft skills. So it's not just the academic or the hard, the technical skills that we think of a lot of times, which that's a whole nother topic too. And I definitely agree with that in principle, but I thought that the way he described this was kind of weak. Number 4, get nimble feedback fast. So speed of implementation, you want to do something, you want to get feedback, and then you want to redesign it. You want to redo it. You want to make modifications and try it again. And then the 5th one, dig the dip. I think, did I write that down right?
Dig the dip.
To be honest, I don't remember what this one was all about. I think that this one, he was talking about how when there is going to be a dip, like in Peak, he talks about how you'll improve to a certain point and then you'll plateau. At this point, this is when you really want to dig in deep, because that dip is going to come at some point. And that's when you need to kind of, like, if this is really something you want to improve, you've got to double down on it. I could be wrong on that. Someone could correct me, I guess, if that's not the general idea. But the whole idea with looping is that this is a cycle that just keeps going. And so you're never going to, quote unquote, escape the learning loop, but you're going to plug in different tactics and different pieces into the learning loop to create the long-term results that you want. And that's the mindset that you need. He mentions in this section that top performers want to get better. 74% of top performers study themselves to make improvements, while underperformers don't. Only 17% study themselves. So a lot of people think like, well, I'm just going to do this thing, I'm going to get better at it. Maybe. But if you study what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and then figure out how to improve one of those small things at a time, like that's going to produce the results that you're looking for.
This section, I think, sparked Peak in me for some reason. Having read the book Peak, I was applying it, I think, mostly to my work at the time, but for whatever reason, when I read this section, I couldn't help but think about mixing sound, like running a soundboard, which I have no idea why I made that connection. But whenever I did, it occurred to me that this is something that I try to do when I run sound at our church specifically. It's a pretty sophisticated board, a sound board that we have there, and a intense system just in general. And whenever I run sound, which, I'm running sound this Sunday, so I was at a rehearsal last night, and it's pretty intense. I'm trying to think of how many different channels we run at one time. We've got 8 channels on a drum, and then amongst other things, I think I had another 12. So call it 20 channels you're working with at one time. And it gets intense doing that. But I bring that up because I have been trying to get better at running sound over the last year or so, and haven't really had a good way to do that. Like I've done some things like trying to pay attention to the music that I'm listening to, and then how do they have it mixed. It was obviously good enough to make it mainstream, on the radio and through a lot of Apple Music and stuff. Like they're popular songs, so it's obviously going to be mixed really well, or should be in theory. It's done better than what I would do. I'll put it that way. And paying attention to that and trying to notice the little details, and how do they have that equalizer set up on that person? Like those things I can slowly pick up, but I haven't been as effective at becoming a better sound person like that I want to be. So when I finished this, I realized that this is an area that I enjoy and I want to get better at it. But in order for that to happen, I have to nail down what this feedback loop is going to be, because I can't just keep going with what I hear on a radio or such, because I don't have somebody explaining to me what I'm doing different than what they are doing. Like you can slowly pick it up, but not the way that I would like. So I haven't figured out what I'm doing with that mic, other than it's an interesting thing to be aware of. So I've played around with trying to find some people who I know are better at running sound than I am, and try to just shadow them to some extent. But at the same time, like I feel like doing live gigs and such is something that I really enjoy doing. I run sound for a local band, which is actually surprisingly good to me. No diss to you guys, because I know a couple of you listen. Hi, but this is this is a thing that I know I want to continue to improve on that. So this is a place that I want to apply this feedback loop mechanism. But I don't know that this particular section of the book was one that explained it well enough and was applicable enough to say that all of that concept and that mentality comes from reading this section in the book. I think it just sparked that thinking on that particular area. But it's an area that I want to improve.
Yeah, for a majority of this section, like I said, I felt like I got a better version of this when I read Peak. But there was an interesting point on page 84, which, at least in my mind, phrased the question, how do you avoid becoming obsolete? And he tied the learning loop to this, which I thought was really interesting. If you go back to the Innovator's Dilemma that we covered with Clayton Christensen, I didn't really enjoy reading that book, but I got a lot out of it. I'm recognizing that now as I'm talking about it, probably a year or two after we read it, that whole book was about why do some companies make these changes and survive, and some of them go the way of the dodo. Like Kodak invented the digital camera, but they were so happy with the results they were getting from their film business that somebody else had to take that technology and run with it. And what could have been the thing that took Kodak to the next level going forward, they basically gave it away. And I think that the learning loop is the key to recognizing those things. The best performers adapt successfully to disruptions by combining redesign of their current business, their current work, whatever, and the learning loop. So they don't ignore reality and they don't write off new technology, but if you keep plugging these things in and keep asking the right questions and keep focusing on these little things that you can control, that can lead you to a successful transition from, in Kodak's case, a film business to a digital technology business or digital photography business. And again, that's just my hypothesis. I don't have specific data to support that, but that's kind of what I was thinking when I was reading this section. And he talks about on page 86, he says, of course, that kind of intense, sustained effort to redesign work and learn requires a terrific degree of motivation, which again goes back to peak and why willpower alone is not going to work. But as long as you maintain the motivation, the why behind the things that you're doing, and you implement this learning loop, I think that can be a hedge of protection against those threats in the future. If you're thinking about it from your business perspective, and I talked about this on Free Agents with David Sparks. He mentioned, like, what's the thing that scares you, and it's like, my job as it exists could not exist tomorrow. Something could come in and just completely wipe out blogs and podcasts and screencasts and everything that I'm doing. There could be some new technology that just replaces all of it, and my skills that I've developed over this last several years are now worthless. Okay, so that can apply to whatever your business is. And I think that if you are so focused on what you are doing now, and which is the tendency, right, as a business owner, to milk all the profit that you can get out of the way things are right now. Take advantage of the opportunity that is staring you in the face, okay? But I think that if you get stuck there, which is what we learned in the Innovator's Dilemma, that could have potentially very serious ramifications and could even kill your business in the future. But I think embracing this learning loop, and this is the key to becoming not obsolete. If I were to, examine the Kodak situation retroactively, which is easy to do now that it's happened, But I kind of think that if they had this mindset that Morten Hansen outlines here, they would look at the new technology that they develop with the digital photography differently. And if they kept employing the learning loop with the new technology pieces that they were discovering as they figured that stuff out, that would have pointed them to, yes, this is the future, and they wouldn't have given that away. They wouldn't have mortgaged the future for the present, if that makes sense.
I think the benefit that I have is that I'm borderline ADD and can't help new and shiny stuff from coming into my brain. So whenever, when I master a specific area or feel like I've mastered it well enough, a specific area of something, I have a tendency to want to go find something different to work on. And a good example of this is, and I did one this morning, I've been jumping into the concept of live streaming lately, which is interesting because, I'm essentially doing live screencasts so people can ask questions as we go. So it's been an interesting process, but part of the reason for that is because live streaming has fascinated me from a hardware and software stance. Like, how do you actually do this, and how do you do it well? So that's a thing that I'm doing. But the part that's interesting about that is that once you figure out how to do that, it opens up a whole new realm of areas that you can start to apply to different sectors. Like, for example, like I run the Productivity Guild community, and that's where I've been doing some of this live streaming, which has been a fun process, but it has taught me that doing that live streaming there could apply to my pro course web development business. And although we do primarily web development and do discourse stuff with that business, like I could be doing some live streams on how do you set up discourse and teaching people how to do different aspects of that and doing it live. So it's a Q&A type thing. So there's different aspects of that because you learn how a new technology works. So I feel like this is an area where I can't help myself. I can go right online. I can do the podcasting thing. I've been doing screencasts and such. Now I'm getting into the live bit, and like those all are great. But I also do web development, and I do client management, and I've got all these different areas that I do things in. So if one thing goes down that takes it all out, it would have to be the entire internet going down. Like the internet itself would have to die before my entire income is gone. Like that's what it would take to bring it all down. So, but if discourse went under tomorrow, well, that's fine. I'll just focus more on the WordPress side of things that we've been doing. If for whatever reason WordPress goes under, well, that's fine. Discourse will pick up on that. If web development in general is gone, well, that means all the other blogging and everything else is gone too. So then I'm going to focus on the IT work that I'm doing with internal infrastructures. Like, okay, we'll just start doing that now. So I try to diversify because I'm a bit gun shy on focusing on one area, but I think some of that just has to do with I get bored if I'm just stuck on one area. which is where this whole learning loop thing I think comes in. Because for me personally, this is almost habitual. Like it's just a process that I love doing, so I can't help that particular piece. I think where I would apply it more is how do I continually get better in a specific area? So with the live streaming bit, like that's fun, but every time I hit the go live button, like there are different things that I want to do to make it just that much better. So trying to say, okay, well, this is a thing that I see professionals doing. That's what I need to work on. Like those are the things that I find myself applying this to.
Right. But diversity is in direct contrast to the focus that he's talking about in section 1. Do less than obsess. So focus equals choosing a few
priorities. You don't have to bring that up. No.
At some point, you do have to focus, and maybe your focus is a little bit more macro. So maybe it's information technology. But what if information technology, as it exists today, like gets wiped out tomorrow with some alien technology? Not that that's going to happen, but I mean, like, what if everything you know is wrong tomorrow?
Yes.
Like, what do? How do you successfully navigate to that next thing? That's where I think this learning loop applied intentionally can help you avoid becoming obsolete. And again, I'm just retroactively applying it to a couple of companies that I remember from when we read The Innovator's Dilemma. But I think this is a really interesting idea. Like, this is something that everybody struggles with. If we view our situation correctly, like we all have some uncertainty about our future. No matter how secure your job is, it may not be there tomorrow. I've got a relative who was high up at a pretty big company here locally and was forced to take early retirement because the company's going through a whole bunch of rounds of layoffs. Like, you can think, well, this company's not going anywhere. That may be true, but your job, no matter how well you've performed individually, like that may not be there tomorrow. And so, like, that's what's interesting about free agents is the whole idea of control and mastering your own ship, taking control for and responsibility for your future. But I think that, like, there's got to be some middle ground between just trying a whole bunch of things all the time and figuring out what works, which is an approach. It's probably a valid approach, but not in the context, I think, of this particular book. So that's what I'm wrestling with in my head is like, how do you do that? And I think that the learning loop here, this is the key, because I think that there's going to be small things that you can test using the learning loop. So let's just say like the screencasting thing that you brought up. All right. So let's say you're doing this screencasting right now, and this is the thing that leads to something else, that leads to something else, that leads to something else, which is eventually like that's the thing Joe does for a living in 5 years, and he's super successful at it. That's kind of what happened with me when I started writing. Like I started writing, and I still write almost every day, but it's not the thing that you see the most. Like my form of writing now is taking notes when I read books or putting together podcast outlines or writing scripts for videos that I'm producing, stuff like that. But none of that stuff was on the radar initially. And that's the stuff that could be gone tomorrow. And I think there's a couple principles here that we should take away, and everybody listening, from this particular section. And really, like, they all tie together. And I think Morten Hansen does a great job of tying these together. So we want to figure out what are the things that we should be focusing on. That's section 1. We want to apply those intentionally in redesigning our work. And then as we're redesigning it, we want to practice these things deliberately. We want to loop them and pay attention to the results. Do, measure, feedback, modify, redo. As long as we follow that formula that he lays out here, I think that could help you successfully transition from one career to another, like I did. But I also think it could help you successfully transition a business from one thing to another. So you don't have to be one of the sad stories that we read about in the version 2 of The Innovator's Dilemma.
All right. I want to talk about passion and purpose. P squared, section 4.
Let's do it.
This is probably the one that I got the most lost on in the whole book. There's one that I was a little frustrated by, but this one was the one that I found myself a bit confused on. So he calls the section P squared, and he makes the distinction between purpose and passion, and how if you want to master your work, you need to take those and multiply them by each other. So you can't just have purpose and you can't just have passion. In both cases, you're going to burn out. You have to have both. one thing he did call out later on is that if you effectively do this, it actually leads to worse work-life balance or tension between those two. It actually makes you not have much of a personal life because you're so passionate about or so excited about the stuff that you're doing. So let's see, correct me if I'm wrong here, Mike, on the definitions between passion and purpose. But he essentially says that passion is the excitement you have for the work that you do. And purpose is basically that your work has a significant contribution to the people that you are serving with that work. So the excitement you have to be doing the work itself times the contribution that makes to society equals P squared. Did I get that right?
Yeah, the way that I wrote it down was passion equals do what you love, purpose equals do what contributes.
There you go.
And right there, I hate this section.
All right. Tell me why.
So, okay. Well, first let me start with what I like about this section. So the story here was really cool. He talks about Genevieve, who's a concierge, and he's got a quote from her. She says, "I care about my guests. Caring comes from energy." I completely agree with that. My issue is with the definition of passion. I think do what you love, and this is why the passion mindset that Cal Newport talks about is so dangerous. This is the traditional view of passion. This is an incorrect view of passion, in my opinion. Passion is not do what you love. The root word for passion is the Latin word pati, literally means to suffer. So doing what you love is going to cause you to suffer. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, but if you combine these, do what you love plus do what contributes, and then you factor in what you just said, the data that he has shows that this leads to worse work-life balance. That's a lot more accurate. Passion to me is being willing to suffer to see what you believe in come to pass, to see your vision materialize. And so if you've got a vision for something, whether it's to start a new business, to create a new product, whatever, you have a vision for where you want your life to be in 5 years, and you're employing all these principles in order to build it that way. Really what this section is saying is that it's not going to just come to you. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to push through some things in order to realize that future, that ideal future that you have in your head. That I completely agree with. But I think the way that he defines it here, and then he's got like the purpose pyramid.
Yeah.
Like I think this whole section is pretty weak. And if you look at this, I have a picture of it here in my notes. So it's got at the bottom level, the base level, create value, do not harm. And I think that makes sense if you view this from the situation of like, I'm in this job that I don't like and I want to get out of it. Okay, so create value, don't hurt the people that you're working with, but this isn't going to be the thing. Eventually, you're going to go to the next level, craft personal meaning, and then at the very top, seek social mission. So it's like, don't hurt other people, like do the thing that really hits the mark for you, and then do the thing that hits the mark for other people, the social mission. Like you got a mission that's bigger than yourself. Yeah, I guess, but I mean, like the stronger sense of purpose, I don't know. I think that it's kind of backwards. I think you need to start with the vision. What's the difference that you want to make? And then from there, that can drive. It's kind of like instead of going up with like the arrows pointing, it should be down. And so like you start with what is the contribution I want to make to the world? And then that's going to drive what you do on a daily basis. And ultimately that's going to result in you benefiting other people, not hurting them, if that makes sense. So I don't know. This is kind of a long-winded rant on the incorrect definition of passion, in my opinion. Mike Rowe, the guy from Dirty Jobs, said it this way. He says, don't follow your passion, but always bring it with you. I think passion is purpose. And I think that you don't have to differentiate between the two of them. But if you have the complete picture of passion as opposed to just do what you love, that is the key to being successful. And you don't have to quit your job to find that. You know, he mentions that in here. It doesn't matter where your situation is. You know, Genevieve could have been upset because she's just a concierge, quote unquote, but she didn't. She decided that I'm going to care about everybody that I come in contact with. And I can apply that same perspective as I record this podcast, as I write a blog post, everything that I do, as I give my presentation at MacStock. Like that's the thing that translates across a bunch of different domains. That's really the root of this. And a lot of people view passion as the situation, you know, which is based on the definition that he gives, do what you love. So Genevieve could say, I don't love being a concierge. I don't love having to look up all this information. I don't love having to run all these errands for my guests. But she doesn't view it that way. She views the people. Chris Bailey talked about people are the reason for the productivity. I care about my guests. Like, as soon as you get your eyes off of your own situation and recognize what impact you are having in the world, the passion will come, in my opinion. And then you can make small changes as you really narrow that down. Sometimes you do just have to start, macro level, big picture. How can I contribute where I am right now? How can I deliver value? Which is kind of what he's saying here. But then learning loop, keep drilling down, keep figuring out what is the thing, what is my unique ability, land on your own life theme, and then do things that are in alignment with that, which is a little bit different than the message that he's giving here.
I felt like his purpose pyramid was just 3 things you should have. Like, you were talking about flipping it.
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense as a mental construct at all.
No, it doesn't. Like, you got to have the broader world view of it. You got to have a personal view of it, and you have to be giving value to someone else. Like, those aren't, like, I don't see them as tiers that you work towards. I think those are just 3 things that you have to have. Like, those are 3 aspects of that. So I'm with you. I don't think this was a section that was like super inspiring as much as just, okay, I think I follow what you're saying, but I don't really know what to do with it. So I don't know that I have a lot to say about this one anymore.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've ranted long enough on that one. Let's go to the next one, which is the first one in section 2.
Part 2, mastering work with others. So the first part was mastering your own work. Do less than obsess. Redesigning your work. Don't just learn. Loop. P squared. And now we're on to part 2, mastering work with others. And the first of these is forceful champions, which I would almost qualify by saying these are the bullies to some extent.
Yep.
I don't know. I kind of had an issue with some of this because he talks a lot about how when you're trying to do something meaningful or trying to be great at what you do, you sometimes have to just power through and force your way in.
Not true. Yeah, I've got issues with this section too.
Yeah, I just didn't care for, like, I couldn't help but reflect on how to win friends and influence people. Like, I couldn't help but have that in my mind and think of so many of the ways that are called out in How to Win Friends that are so much more subtle and more effective than set your purpose and go until you hit it. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, he told a story about a guy who manufactured a fake ad in order to get a point across and in order to get support for his project. I was like, I would never do that. Like, then people can't trust anything you do because they don't know if it's a ruse or not. Anyway, I didn't like this section.
Yeah, your quote-unquote purpose cannot be greater than your integrity, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I actually wrote down in this section, feels like a jerk-led repurposing of how to win friends and influence people.
There you go. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, he talks about forceful champions have mastered 2 skills. They inspire others by evoking emotions, and they circumvent resistance by developing smart grit. So again, he talks about grit. If you were to assign like a book that we've read for each of these sections, grit would be the book here.
Right.
But he makes an important distinction, I think, when he talks about smart grit, because he says that grit can scare people away. So you have to employ it in the right scenario. And he used an example, I think it was this section, about the guy who had the purpose to like develop the pads, and like it completely ostracized him from everybody that he ever knew, and everybody thought he was the crazy guy.
Right.
And years later, like he finally landed on it. But the moral of the story, as he told it, was that there was better ways to do this, which I agree with. But you don't need to succeed at the expense of others, which is really what was the tone of this chapter, in my opinion. It really felt a lot like a scarcity mindset as opposed to an abundance mindset, where it's okay if we all win. It's fine if somebody else is successful because they're not stealing the limited amount of success that I would have been able to achieve. I guess maybe if you are working and you're climbing a corporate ladder, maybe you view that a little bit differently because there's only a certain number of higher level positions available, and there's so many people who have an MBA and they're all vying for that same position. That I guess what I'm saying is I can see how his story that he told at the beginning would have influenced the way that he taught this section, but it's kind of not what I've seen from my experience.
Yeah. I don't know that I want to dive into this one much more, to be honest with you, just because like you can be a champion for a specific cause or your particular project, but even the title of this, Forceful Champions, like it just feels kind of dirty to me, and I didn't care for it. I get the idea, like don't back down, like I get that, and that's fine, but it felt like he was advocating for, some shady methods, and that I'm not behind. Like, I wasn't okay with that.
Yeah, I do want to call out really nothing to take action on for me from this, but I thought it was an interesting anecdote and really kind of shows where we're at as a culture. Page 121, he said that studies show that women in the workplace can be perceived as either competent or liked, but not both. And I thought that was kind of sad. I definitely can see situations where that has played out, based on, again, his research. I'm not saying this. I don't agree with this in principle, but it's the way things are in the business world, or at least it's the way things are in certain situations in the business world. I'm sure, women who are in the business world can chime in as to whether that's accurate or not, but I kind of think that it is. And it's sad. It shouldn't have to be that way, but really, like, that really gets back to the whole idea behind this Forceful Champions chapter is, do we have to do things this way? Like, isn't there a better way? Can't we make people upset at the present and excited about the future without being jerks, without putting down people, or without forcing women who happen to be in the business world to embrace one of these? Like, can't they be both competent and liked without appearing weak? Like, that's sad. And, like I said, not really an action item associated with it, but it does get me thinking, like, even like the stuff that we do for the podcast and things like that, to be careful about how I say or phrase things so that I'm not contributing to this problem, that I'm actually helping create a solution.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And this is having come from a corporate America, I could see it play out. Like, I can't say that I was aware of it at the time, but whenever I think back to a lot of the meetings and different interactions that I had, I could see it. Obviously I'm not female, so I can't speak to it directly, but just knowing some of the interactions, and I was never like a leader of any meetings in those senses. So I don't think it was really a thing that I hope I didn't participate in. But it's a thing that I think I did, looking back on it again, I could see that being a thing that happens. So again, it sucks.
Yeah. And I think that for us in our current situation where we're not encountering it every day, like, the thing to take away from this is the awareness that stuff like that happens. And if you do find yourself in a situation where that is the case, do everything in your power to fight against it. Don't view women in your workplace as either competent or nice. Like, figure out a way that we can work together where they can be both. And that really gets into the next section here, the fight and unite. This, I thought a lot of, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which interestingly in that story, the lead character, the CEO, is female. And there are definitely people in that narrative that Patrick Lencioni that he tells in that book that don't like her.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other people who look past that, and the organization as a whole can be successful. So I think that book in particular is, after reading the Forceful Champions section, that's a breath of fresh air and a reminder that, again, even though it's a fictional story, that it doesn't have to be that way.
So yes, the next section, you kind of alluded to it and spoke to it a little bit. Fight and unite. And I hear this quite a bit. And I'm trying to think of a good example of where I've seen this play out. And honestly, the best one that I've seen at a large scale was actually at our church, where, we had a big building project that we were debating. It was not a go forward. There were folks that were for it and folks that were, or I shouldn't say that. Everyone was for the building project. It was just the financing methods that people were split on. And,
right.
That's pretty typical. But one thing I really appreciated about our church was that we were both sides were very vocal and were very involved in the debate on, what is the right way to go. And when it was all said and done, vote was done, building project moved forward, and the financing methods were nailed down. And it was like the whole thing was like, it was done and everybody's on board. Like, okay, this is the way that we're going to do this. And everyone's in, they're all on the bus. They're all ready to go. Let's get this thing done. So it was a good example to me that you can be on opposite sides of a situation or of a decision. But once that decision's made, if you're truly bought into the organization or the decision itself that's being made, get on board. Like, don't just sit back and, sulk over it. Like, jump in, you get together, unite, to use his word, and get things done. So I don't know. I appreciated this section because it's one that I feel like it's not taught in a lot of places. I feel like a lot of us know in the back of our heads that this is a thing you should do, that you should fight until a decision is made and then jump on board. And I did appreciate his view on this for sure.
Yeah, the story he mentions at the beginning, I think it's Reckitt Benckiser. They asked him, why are you successful? And he says, we succeed because of, number one, fighting in meetings, and number two, fostering unity. And that does seem contradictory on the surface unless you've read the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Another place that I've seen this articulated, and I don't have the link in front of me, but Jeff Bezos, I believe, Amazon, has this idea of disagree but commit. On page 147, he says, in teams that unite, team members commit to decisions even if they disagree, and they all work hard to implement the decision without second guessing or undermining it. And this really just illustrates that people don't necessarily want to get their way, but they do want to be heard. They want to know that the concerns that they have and the feedback that they have to give, it's not just going in one ear and out the other. I think I definitely have felt that way in like Asian efficiency, for example. One of the things I respect about it is that, like, a lot of our meetings, I'm the guy who's always complaining about things, quote unquote complaining. I point out all the ways that things might not work, but it's a positive environment still. A big piece of that is the gratitude that we do at the end of all of our growth hacking meetings. But it's just thinking of the things that other people don't think of. The more perspectives that you get, the better off you're going to be as an organization, the better the end product is going to be, the more likely you are to succeed. He says that the chance for great ideas is much higher when you have people with different backgrounds. It doesn't have to necessarily be cultural backgrounds. It can just be your personal background. It can be the unique perspective that you bring to a specific situation. Your team can't fight well, though, unless you have those diverse viewpoints. I think a lot of the organizations that I have been involved with in the past where this hasn't worked, that's been the thing that's caused it to fail. Is you've got a team which is all looking at it from the same way. It's that classic groupthink, and this is the right way to do things. And then whenever anybody, usually I'm that guy, who says, maybe this isn't the right way to do it, everybody kind of gangs up on that one person. He's like, well, what are you talking about? And I think, like, the biggest thing I got from the 5 dysfunctions of a team is that just because you're not fighting about things as a team doesn't mean that there's real unity in the team or the organization. I think that fighting is good as long as it's done in the right way. I mean, obviously, you're not belittling other people and making fun of their viewpoints and trying to put them down. I mean, they have some stories of that in the 5 dysfunctions of a team as well. But if you if you treat other people respectfully, if you walk with integrity, and which is kind of getting back to the Forceful Champions chapter, like, it doesn't have to be a negative thing every time that you have these meetings and you, quote unquote, have these fights. One of the things I really loved about this section was the Heineken meeting cards that he talked about on page 151. I tried to find a place where I could order these, but I couldn't find them online. But basically, they have these 3 different cards. The green one, I think, says all in, ask me why. The red one says challenge, or I have another question. Maybe that's the yellow one. And then the red one is shiny object alert, basically, like, get back on track. And so people in the meetings will just hold these up as the meeting's going on. And then, if you do have other questions, like, you're going to overcome those challenges just by talking through those things. And no one is going to hide what they really feel and then in 6 months say, oh, I knew this was a bad idea. Like, you're going to get it all out in the open. And they talk about how that being a big key to their success.
I think this can play in pretty well to the next section here, but before we get to that, I think there's something to be said for voicing opinions before a decision is made. And I don't think this is something that people do regularly when they should. Like that's at least my view on it. And it has a lot to do with so much of, I guess, a lot of meetings that are just run poorly. We've talked about meetings before, the 5 dysfunctions we go through, ways of running meetings that work and ways that they don't. And I, as somebody who works with clients, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I love doing that because I get to see so many different teams and see how they work with each other. Again, there's a lead in for the next section, but which is on collaboration, just so ease people's minds. But, working with so many different teams, you get a chance to see how do they work together, what does and doesn't work, and how do you lead a meeting such that you can accomplish something successful without causing a lot of angst or and because I'm on so many different calls like that, you start to get a sense for if someone has an opinion and they're not sharing it. Like you can start to get that feeling that there's something that should be said now by this person, but they're not saying it. Even when it's just a phone call and there's no video involved or in-person involved, like even then it's still...
Video helps though, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And in-person even more. But you can start to get a feeling for that. And so many times, I'm not the one that's leading the meeting or leading the call, but I want to jump in and just say, okay, Sam, why are you not... Like, what's up? Like, something's going on. You got, start talking. Something along those lines. But it's not my place to do that. And I can't do that because, I'm the contractor in that case. So I need to keep my mouth shut and just do what I'm told in a lot of cases if I want to maintain the contract. But there are cases where you jump on a call and the team is one that they really welcome constructive feedback or criticism. And, in those cases, yeah, absolutely. If I see something that's off with the way the business is operating, I'll jump in and say it. And they're open to that. But to be honest with you, most teams aren't. And I wish they were. And if these aspects, this fight and unite concept was one that was more commonplace, I mean, everybody's more opinions would be out there, but I can't help but think that so many companies would be run in a lot better ways, and people would feel heard in a lot of cases. So I don't know. I wish it was more common.
For sure. Yeah, I've seen Tan do this in meetings at Agent Efficiency where somebody or a couple people, will be leading the conversation and contributing just to draw stuff out of other people. Be like, so-and-so, you haven't said anything yet. What do you think?
Yeah. Yep. Which is a classic move.
Even without the video, to your point, So yeah, meeting management or meeting leadership, I guess, like if you were to, in a corporate environment, pick one skill to develop that would exponentially increase your effectiveness and your productivity, that would be the thing. Going back to my Gap book from last time, I think it was No Fail Meetings by Michael Hyatt. That's an interesting little read with several practical things that you can do, whether you happen to be the person in charge of the meeting or not. But there's so much time that's spent in meetings, and it's really kind of depressing when you think of how ineffective most of them are, because people are too scared to say stuff, or they're too scared to say what they really think. I've never really had that problem, which has gotten me in trouble before.
But in the midst of a lot of these meetings, like I alluded to it a couple times, brings us to the last of the 7 principles here, and that is the 2 sins of collaboration. And the first is under collaboration, and as you would expect, the second one is over collaboration. And I think under collaboration is probably more common, I would think.
Yep.
That's my take on it. It seems like it's more common that people feel like, well, you just need to assume this if I don't XYZ. That's frustrating. Like, okay, well, now I'm assuming this every single time. It's just a matter of, days and weeks before that falls through. So I wish that was not a case, but it is. I don't know if I'm one of those. I might be in some arenas. I feel like this is a thing that, some areas of life I'm bad at under collaborating, and others I'm probably over collaborating, where I'm sharing too much in too many different places at too many different times. So I could see where these are areas that you need to be aware of. I wasn't real sure what to do with them once I finished this section. It's like, okay, well, this is cool, but I feel like I wasn't really given any guidelines or anything concrete to help me nail down if I'm committing one or the other, other than just these are some things that can happen.
Right.
And you kind of have to interpret that on your own, which I think is fine. I just wanted something a little more concrete from it. Maybe that's just me being picky.
Well, I think that based on our situation where we aren't, well, maybe yours is a little bit different because you're working with all the other developers, but I kind of think that for most people in an online work environment, you will err on one of these and you will know right away which side you happen to be on. Because when you have people in different locations and you do nothing, you're going to naturally under collaborate. And I think that a lot of places will try to avoid that scenario, and the result of that is going to be the over collaboration. He's got 5 rules for disciplined collaboration in here, which I think are cool, and you could apply these to just about anywhere. Number 1, establish a compelling why do it case for every proposed collaboration. If it's not compelling, don't do it. Just say no. So ask why collaborate in the first place. Number 2, craft a unifying goal that excites people so much that they subordinate their own selfish agendas. Number 3, reward people for collaboration results, not activities. Number 4, devote full resources, time, skills, money to a collaboration. If you can't, give it everything that it needs and scale it back or scrap it. And then number 5, if you lack confidence in your partners, tailor trust boosters to solve specific trust problems quickly. I think that one's really interesting, especially when you think about like online projects and you're working with people that maybe you've not worked with before. The tendency can be to view that as, well, they're gonna hurt me, they're gonna screw me over, this is gonna fail. Like you can view it as like it's gonna fail unless I fix it, or you can on the other side just air that, oh, they're gonna do everything that they say that they're gonna do, and I don't have to worry about it. And I think that either of those scenarios, when you are approaching it blindly, are dangerous. I really like this idea of putting trust boosters into your collaboration. And maybe the way to do this is just through different project milestones or sprints. I know that's another book that's been recommended several times. It's Scrum by Jeff Sutherland. Maybe we cover that one at some point in the future. But I do think that there's some good rules and things to consider when you are collaborating here. But I agree that, unless you're in a situation like the over collaboration, the picture I got was like the Facebook office, an open office environment where it's designed to foster collaboration. Like that's everybody who I know has worked in that environment has said that it's horrible because you have to fight against it in order to get anything done. And so I think that like if you're in that situation, there's probably stuff in here that you could apply right away. And you're like, yeah, I recognize that over collaboration is just completely zapping my effectiveness and it's making me not great at work. And so what can I do what can I control to change that? But for me, where I'm not embarking on new collaboration ventures all the time, this is more just like nice to know I'll use this someday.
Yeah, I collaborate with a lot of different teams, including my own, on a daily basis. So like this is an area where I feel like I appreciated his thoughts on this, but this might be why I wanted something more concrete from him, just because I do a lot of this. And I know that with the team that I'm leading, I try to share as much as I possibly can. It's out of line for me to be sharing things like finances or, the legal agreements and the contracts and stuff. Like those things are out of line for me to be sharing. So that would be over collaborating in my mind. But sharing as much about the development process and how things should be done and what the end goal is, the more of that I can share with them, the better I think they're able to serve that client. So I don't know that, like, even in that realm, I feel like there's always areas like I could probably do a little bit more to help them understand it a little bit better. So I'm always fine-tuning that. If anything, this is where that feedback loop, like the looping mechanism, comes in for me, just because I can see the way projects happen on a regular basis and how fast they move. Because of that, I get the chance to see the results of how I've collaborated on a specific project very quickly. So I can constantly be iterating on that and how to do it better. So I do a lot of this, so I appreciated his thoughts. I just wish he gave a little bit more detail on what to do about it, versus just, here are the 2 things you need to be aware of. So there you go. Part 3, Mike.
Yeah, again, this is the personal part, though. I mean, maybe in Good to Great, which I haven't read, maybe there's professional collaboration in there, and there's the point by point plan for you to you to implement this. So maybe
maybe I need to go do that one. Part 3, mastering your work life.
There is no work life. What the heck? Seriously, people. There is just life. You have to balance this. Okay, everything that you have to do is in your jurisdiction. And there is no clear-cut boundary between work and life, and technology makes it grayer every single day. But I do like the page on page 194 where he talks about top performance in any field seems to demand personal sacrifice. We presume that rising to the top requires crazy hard work, fortitude, endless practice, long hours, that it entails doing without vacations, neglecting your kids or your spouse, and spending weekends and holidays glued to your computer screen. Because we think this way, we tend to let our job responsibilities balloon out of control. Then to achieve some semblance of a personal life, we go back in to erect a protective shield around our lives to prevent work from crushing them. See, right there. He's saying this is an artificial distinction. We switch off the smartphone at home or refrain from checking email when watching our kids' baseball games or leave work early on certain days, all to prevent work from burying our private lives. Such measures only serve to treat the symptom, the result of working too much, and not the root cause, the work itself. So when I read this, I don't think this is from the book. I think this was me. I was thinking about okay, so how does this play out for most people? Number one, we end up doing way too much. We're busy. We do not do less than obsessed, like he talks about in chapter 1, which leads to number 2, we get overwhelmed. And then, like he says, we try to figure out how we can separate work from life and achieve a little bit more life and a little bit less work, but it doesn't work that way. All right. So number 3, we try to create work-life balance. Doesn't work. Everything at work is fighting against that work-life balance, which is by design the way we've set it up when we separate those two. If we take something from one, we're going to give it to the other and vice versa. So number 4, we resent our work. And then how does that typically play out? Number 5, we change our job, we change our career. We think that if I can just change the externals of my situation, it's going to get better. And that's not the case. You've got to figure this out for yourself, and you have to apply intentional imbalance from the 12-week year. You have to pick the things that you want to prioritize. Put your big rocks in the jar first. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. And when you do that, the things that aren't important, they'll fall to the wayside, and it's not really going to matter. And if you're so concerned about what everybody at work is thinking about you, and you're living your life out of your inbox, which is a to-do list that other people can write on, you're never going to get there. But I think there's a lot of stuff in this book which is good. It will get you on the path to work on how you work. You don't have to protect yourself from the work because you're working smarter. And there's a whole bunch of benefits that he talks about in here of working smarter. I did have an action item from this section, which was to make a list of things that I shouldn't be doing. But again, the whole section, mastering your work life, this is an artificial distinction. It does not exist.
Okay. I don't think I would disagree with you at all. I will be honest, when I read this whole section, I finished it and was just confused. I couldn't quite figure out what he was getting at. It's like, okay, work life. What are we talking about? Sure, I have work and I have life, but I do work within my life. Huh?
Exactly. See, if you understand purpose and passion the right way,
yes,
you don't have to make this distinction. He has 3 tactics to mitigate the negative impacts of the 7 practices. Number 1, spend your time divided. So do a lot of different things. Don't always be working all the time. I get that. Number 2, keep your passion in check. What? Don't do the thing that you were created to do? This makes no sense to me, but it makes sense if you view it as your passion is going to cause you to just work on the work side of your life, and it's not going to contribute anything to the life side of your life, which again is what you get when you define work-life balance. You're either on the left or you're either on the right. You cannot be both. So that makes sense if you view it that way, but I don't think it has to be that way. Your passion should propel everything that you do, but the things that you do should be hitting the mark. And if you're living your life in alignment, I don't think you have to do this. I don't think you have to say, well, this is what I'm created to do, but I'm only going to do so much of it because Otherwise, everything else that's just really more important sometimes is going to be like that doesn't make any sense. Keep the main thing, and then just don't worry about it.
Yep.
Number 3, don't take it personally. Don't fight nasty. This is a really good point, and this kind of goes back to the last couple sections that we covered.
But at the same time, I felt like that contradicted his Forceful Champions chapter.
It does. It does. It definitely does.
So when I was thinking through this piece here, and trying to determine, what does this mean for my work life, whatever that is, I essentially landed on the concept that this last chapter is a summary. He intended it to be a separate section, and I think he intended to explain, some of the potential downfalls of this, but it was a summary with a warning that, if you follow all of this truly, it actually doesn't lead to a very happy life. So
you got to put in checks and balances. Which you do have to put in checks and balances. You do have to make sure that you're meeting all of the responsibilities that you have. But I think you can do that without creating this artificial distinction of this is me at work and this is me at home. I think that's a recipe for hypocrisy, to be honest. I mean, and I'm going back to my comment about your integrity needs to be greater than your purpose. Like, you are who you are. And I see a lot of people who maybe would try to become a forceful champion at work. They'll try to be something that they're not in their professional life, and that just ends up hurting them. Like, all I know to be is who I am. And that's one of the things that I've heard over and over again from people is they appreciate my authenticity. And I'm just like, well, yeah, but of course, like, I can't be anything else.
Right.
Every time I've tried to do it somebody else's way, I haven't been able to do it as well as that other person. So, like, why even go there? Just let me be me, you be you, okay? And then we'll decide whether there's alignment here and we can work together or not. If you hate me because of my stances on this, and this, then fine. Good luck to you.
Yep.
And I'll figure out somebody whose unique ability complements my unique ability, and we'll do something awesome together.
I think he got pigeonholed with the title of his book a little bit because it's great at work. Well, just by the nature of how we define things, like, that would mean that there's a certain piece of my life that I do quote unquote work during, and he's now stuck on this personal life versus work life. Like, he now has to have that.
Yeah, I should have been great at life.
Yeah, instead of saying this is all great at life, it's great at this one piece of life. And I think he got into the book and it's like, okay, this is how you be really great at your work. But he wants it to apply outside of work as well, and he tried, and I don't care for it. So, action items, I have 3 down. Okay, these are primarily about work because, great at work. Number 1 is never be the bottleneck. Because of the fact that I have people that do work for me, I am easily the one who can hold things up. I never want to be that person. So I always want to be waiting on either the developers or the client instead of being the one who's tying things down. I'm not the best at that right now, so I need to resolve that. And part of that comes from action item 2. I need to start measuring the time it takes to kick off a project to the time we finish a project. I have enough people working for me now that we should be able to do all of our projects in a certain amount of time. Like, I think the time I was setting down is 3 weeks. We should be able to do just about any size project in 3 weeks. And it's just a matter of the bigger the project, I just put more people on it. That's the way things work. So I haven't been good at that. I've got some projects, like one right now I know has been going on for 7 months. It's like, okay, I've been going back through that. It's like, you know what? If we had really been on it, we probably could have done that in 3 weeks. But, that's the way things go right now. So I want to get better about that, but I need to be putting some numbers on it so that I can see those and know if we're actually hitting that or not. Which comes from my last action item here of building better segmentation into my day. There are a lot of things I do with the IT work that I do for the church or a local contractor. I do a lot of this media creation, making media of sorts, whether it's writing or doing video work or podcasting or such. Like, I do a lot of that media work. But then at the same time, I do obviously client management and development work. and I know what times of the day I'm best at each of those. So I'm trying to get myself building in better habits of when I do things at those different times of the day. So hopefully that will help me become better at the other two as well. But that's what I got.
Nice. All right, so I've got consider how I can redesign my work. Again, this is something that I mentioned. I've been doing this. I want to continue to do this. It's a good reminder to constantly be looking at the way that I do things. It's not really a specific thing that I'm going to have results from next time, which is par for the course. Number 2, make a list of things I shouldn't be doing. This one you can hold me accountable to. There are definitely things that I just do because it's part of the routine, and I haven't really thought about how can I work smarter. And I think this will be an exercise that is going to be very illuminating. And then number 3, ask open-ended questions. This is something I want to apply specifically to meetings that I have to combat that groupthink where everybody just thinks like this one idea that we have happens to be the best one.
Right.
Kind of playing devil's advocate or asking somebody like, well, what do you think? Not saying like, do you agree, disagree, but asking those open-ended questions where they have to create something on the spot. I see a lot of value in that in a lot of different arenas.
Nice. So, your choice. How did you rate it?
All right. So there's parts of this book I would rate 6 stars if I could. I absolutely loved it. There are also parts of this book which you've heard me rant about here, which I didn't really like. Balancing those out, though, I think I'm still going to give it. I'm torn between a 4 and a 4.5. I'm going to go with a 4. Just because I probably spent half of the time on this podcast railing about some of the things, but there's some really, really cool ideas here. And if you were to look for one book to get a lot of the ideas across, if like one book to recommend to somebody instead of like 4 or 5 different books from the last episode that we did, this would be the one that I would recommend to people. So it's a great book. I'm really glad that I read it. There's a couple things that keep me from rating it higher publicly, I think, but definitely one that I'm going to go back and refer to over and over again.
Nice. I will join you at the 4.0. And there are some sections like, okay, what? I disagree with you here. And there are areas where I just got confused. But to your point, there are also areas where like, okay, you had me outside royally confused about what it is that I need to be doing and got me to ask these really raw and honest questions that I haven't been asking myself. So kudos to Hansen on that one. But yes, I'm with you. There are sections I would rate definitely a 5. There are sections I would give a 2. So time I average all that stuff out, I think it's probably somewhere around 4. So that's where I'm going to put it.
I also think that Morten Hansen is way smarter than I am. And if I were to get a cup of coffee with him, he could explain to me the things that I have disagreements with, and he would probably put me in my place.
True. There's that too.
But as I stand here right now, I'm going to give it 4 stars. And also, like I said in the last episode, it's interesting how like we rate a book based on its entirety. We just read it.
Right.
But then a year or 2 years from now, what do you recall from this book? I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those books that stuff sticks with me.
True.
So in the future, maybe this is 4 stars is too low for this book. As I sit here right now, though, I'm going to give it 4 stars.
All right. Put that one on the shelf. The next book coming up, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I have mentioned a few times in the last few episodes about wanting to build better habits, and that theme continues to come up. So I think it's about time we talk about habits, Mike, and what better book to do that with than The Power of Habit, which is kind of a classic in that realm. So I'm excited to go through this one with you.
Nice. Yeah, this is definitely one of those classic productivity books, which I've never read the whole thing, so be interesting. All right, mine is Boundaries by Henry Cloud, which has been voted for by several people, including my wife, which, sorry guys, her vote counts more than yours, but still I think it's got 3 or 4 votes in the Bookworm Club, so it's I think the top vote getter. She read it. She absolutely loved it. I know Curtis McHale's talked about how great this book is, so I have high expectations for this one.
Yeah, as I look at the recommendations list right now, the number 1 voted book is Great at Work, which we just covered. So as soon as this episode releases, I will close the recommendations voting, and then this will become its placeholder. Number 2 at the list I'm looking at right now is Boundaries by Henry Cloud. So,
yep,
just picking them off one at a time. There you go. That's the way it works. For a gap book, I am picking up The Pleasures of Reading in an Age of Distraction. Go figure. Kind of my forever beating the drum thing of being fascinated with how technology screws with our heads. So can't help myself.
Joe continues his list of analog books from the Bookworm draft.
No shame.
All right. My Gap book is a book that is not out yet. It is a galley copy that was sent to me by Chris Bailey called Hyperfocus, which is going to be available in August, nice. I believe. So the Productivity Project is one of those books that we covered, and I find myself going back to it over and over and over again. And so I'm excited about the topic of hyperfocus. It kind of seems like his approach to deep work and all those other types of books. But I like Chris Bailey's style, and I think it's going to be a little bit different. So I'm excited to dive into this one.
Well, we've mentioned our recommendations list a few times now. The way to get your book on, or your recommendation on that list, go to club.bookworm.fm. Create a new topic there, assign it to the recommendations list. It's that simple. And there's even a button in the menu that just hit recommend, and it'll fill out all the stuff for you. So join the club, hit the recommend button, get your book on the list, and then from there you can see all of the recommendations that have already been out there. If you do make a recommendation, make sure you hit the vote button, because you can vote for books that have already been recommended, but
you can vote for your own, unlike me.
Yeah, vote for your own, dude. Like, come on. Mike won't vote for himself, but you can vote for yourself. Like, that's the way you should do this. So yes, club.bookworm.fm, and that will get you all the stuff you need to do that.
All right, and if you want to support Bookworm, you can do so in the next couple weeks by going to bookworm.fm/shirt, picking yourself up an awesome shirt or sweatshirt. We've got both. Or going to iTunes and leaving us a rating and review. I still have my personal vendetta against KCRW. I want to be the number one return for Bookworm. But thanks to everybody who listens and supports the show. Thanks for making the t-shirt campaign successful. I really appreciate all of the feedback that we're getting in the club. Really appreciate everybody doing this with us. It's a lot more fun.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun to have the whole community jump in a collected space. So it's a fun time. Yeah, I've really been enjoying that. So hopefully you're making Bookworm a habit. If you're not, you should join us next time, and we will talk about habits with Charles Duhigg in The Power of Habit.